Okay, so far with slope, we have talked about what it is, and we have talked about one way to find it. We have found slope given a graph, and so you have learned rise over run. Today we are going to do slope from a table, which is not all that different, but you will remember that slope, which we talked about on Friday, is the rise over the run when you're doing a graph. And if you will remember, and if you'll think about that, rise is your y values because it's the up and down, and then run is going to be your x values because it's the right and left. And so when we do this from a table, the thing you need to understand that your rise is your change in y values, and your run is your change in x values. And so slope is the change in the y values over the change in the x values. And to shorten it so I don't have to write this all the time, we write this. We write delta y over delta x. This little triangle is the Greek letter delta, and what it means is the change in. Okay, so I don't have to write out the words change in. This means the change in y over the change in x. And we say delta y over delta x. So when we find slope from a table, that's what we're going to do. We're going to find the change in the y values and divide that, or write it as a ratio of the change in the x values. So let's practice a few. We're starting with number 2. As you know, my numbering's all off, but it's okay. So if you'll remember, we're going to find the change in y over the change in x, and that's how we're going to find slope. So my slope for this first table is going to be my change in the y values. So from here to here, my y from 1 to 4 changes by plus 3 because it is increasing. And from here to here, my x changes from 0 to 4, which is plus 4. So if I want to do delta y over delta x, I take my change in the y values, which was 3, over my change in the x values, which was 4. And so the slope of the line that comes from this table is 3/4. You can test it again and make sure that it still works here. From 4 to 7 is also a change of plus 3. And from 4 to 8 is also a change of plus 4. So it's still 3/4. Now the next one involves some decimals, and that's okay. Alright, but you do the same thing. We're going to do the change in y over the change in x. And so the change in my y values from 3.75 to 5 is the change of 1.25. Okay? And then my change from 1 to 2 is a change of 1. So this change, my y values change by 1.25, and my x values change by 1. Now this is not the only way to write this. It's okay to leave it like this. It is totally okay to leave it like this, but this is the same thing as just 1.25, because 1.25 divided by 1 is just 1.25, and if I wanted to convert this to a decimal, it would be a fraction, it would be 5/4, because 5/4 is the same thing as 1 1/4. And so it could either be this as your slope, or it could be this as your slope. You just need to know that these mean the same thing, because you could see it appear either way. Excuse me. Okay, so now let's do the next one. Let's look here. Well, we're going to find our change in y from 10 to 8. Now this one is decreasing and is getting smaller, so my slope is going down. -2 is from 10 to 8 is a -2. But my x is going from -3 to +0, so that's an increase of 3. So my change in y over my change in x. My change in y is -2. My change in x is +3, so my slope is -2/3. What this tells me is that my graph decreases from left to right instead of increasing from left to right. It gives me information automatically about what the line looks like. Now let's look at 5 and 6. 5 is very interesting. Look at your y values. What do you notice about the y values all the way through? Hopefully you see that they are all exactly the same. So when I do my change in y over my change in x here, my change in the y values, there isn't one. It is not changing at all. From 5 to 5 is a change of nothing. From here to here, however, is a change of +3. And so when I plug this into my delta y over delta x, my delta y is 0. My delta x is 3, and we talked about this the other day. 0 divided by 3, or to reduce this, is the same thing as 0. Since this has a slope of 0, hopefully you remember that that means what we have here is a hoi, which means this is a horizontal line. And so if I were to graph this, it would be a horizontal line. And that's, to be able to recognize that right off is very important. Now number 6. Look at your x values for this one on number 6. your x values are all exactly the same. So let's do our change in y. From 1 to 4 is plus 3. But my x values have a change of plus 0 because they are all exactly the same. So when I do my delta y over delta x, I end up with 3 over 0. And if you'll remember from our discussion the other day, this is undefined because we cannot do division by 0. And hopefully that reminds you of VUX, because an undefined slope means we have a vertical line. And so this line is a vertical line, goes straight up and down. These two are very important. It's very important to be able to recognize it right off. One more, and then we'll move on to an application problem really quick. So my change here is plus 12, so I'm increasing. My change here, though, from 4 to negative 2 is a decrease of 6. So my delta y over delta x becomes 12 over negative 6, and when I simplify that, that becomes negative 2. So the slope of this line is negative 2 or negative 2 over 1. And so my rise over my run, I am decreasing. Again, I have a line that decreases from left to right. So let's apply this really quickly. Here's my application problem. On the second day, Paula had 200 pages of her book left to read, while on the fourth day, she had 150 pages left. Complete the table, including what the independent and dependent variables represent, and then find the slope and tell what it means. So here's what I have. I have the days Paula has been reading and the number of pages she has left. I need independent and dependent. Well, my pages depend on the number of days I have been reading. So X is the days because it's independent. Y is the pages because it is dependent. And we're going to write down our information. I'm going to do 1, 2, 3, 4 here. And what it tells us is that on the second day, there were 200 pages left. And on the fourth day, there were 150 pages left. And I've got to finish filling in this table. But in order to finish filling in this table, I need to know the slope. You do not have to have consecutive numbers in the table to find the slope, because all I have to have is the change in y over the change in x. As long as I can find my change in these two y values, and then I can find the change in these two x values, this change in y matches up with this change in x, and it's okay. So my change here is minus 50, because I've lost 50 pages. My change here is positive 2. It's from 2 to 4 is 2. So my delta y over delta x is negative 50 over 2, which is negative 25. And so what this tells me is that she reads 25 pages a day. So let's just go with the numbers that we have. From day 2 to day 3, she had to read 25 pages, which means if I read 200 pages, I have 175 pages left. I'm minus 25. And then if I want to go backwards in my table, I'm minusing 25 as I go through my table down. But if I go up through my table, I have to do the opposite, so I have to add 25. So she started on the first day with 225 pages in her book. So our table is now filled in. My slope is negative 25 or negative 25 over 1. What it represents? Well, it's y over x. So this means it is the pages over days. And so what it means in this situation is that she reads 25 pages per day. And so this little slash means per. So she reads 25 pages a day if she's reading at a constant rate, and that's the meaning of the slope in this situation, and that is how we find it. So there is slope from a table. I will see you guys tomorrow. I hope your weekend ends on a high note. See you then.